I'd like to share with you this morning two gospel lessons. The first gospel lesson is from the 13th chapter of Matthew, and really the second gospel lesson will also be from the 13th chapter of Matthew, the parables that Jesus uses to describe the kingdom of God. This first one is the 13th chapter, verses 1 through 9, 18 to 23. Jesus went out and sat beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there, while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil. And they sprang up quickly, but since they had no depth of soil, when the sun rose, they were scorched. And since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. And other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what is sown in the heart. This is what was sown on the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet such a person has no root, but endures only for a while. And when trouble or persecution arise on account of the word, that person immediately falls away. So for what was sown among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but cares of the world and the lure of wealth choke the word, and it yields nothing. But as for what is sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields, the one in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and in another 30. The gospel of the Lord. And in conjunction with that, then, the 13th chapter of Matthew goes on for this parable setting. Another parable Jesus put forth before the crowds. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field, but while everyone was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the slaves of the whole householder came and said to him, "Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from?" And he answered, "An enemy has done this." And the slaves said to him, "Then do you want us to go and gather them?" But he replied, "No, for in gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat along with them. Let both of them grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time, I will tell the reapers, collect the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn." Then he left the crowds and went into the house. And his disciples, approaching him, were saying, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field." And he answered, "The one who sows good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seeds are the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of age, and the reapers are the angels. Just as the weeds are collected and burned up with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all causes of sin and evildoers, and they will throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Let anyone with ears listen." The gospel of the Lord. Well, I must say it is truly great to be back amongst my parish family, and we can share beach stories that we experienced this past week at coffee hour. But right now, we need to turn our attentions to the gospel for this morning. And today we are continuing on that journey of kingdom parables. And since we were at the beach last week, I didn't get a chance to preach on last week's gospel. So I thought that I would combine those two in the readings of the gospel from last week and this week. And I will try to keep it as short as I can. Now we are in the middle of Farmer Jesus and his parables. There is a set of 3 parables that focus on agriculture. Sowing, growing, and the reaping are the overall themes here. Last week's parable was about sowing the seeds. It was the parable of the sower who scattered those seeds, some falling on hard-packed paths, and others falling on the edge of the field and not taking good root. And some landed amongst the weeds and the thorns and were choked out. And finally, some fell then on fertile soil and bore much fruit. And today we heard about the weeds and the wheat. A farmer sows grain, and while everyone is sleeping, the enemy sneaks in and sows weeds amongst the wheat. When the plants matured, it became obvious that the wheat was mixed with the weeds. It was only after all had grown and matured that you could tell the difference between the two. And during that time of growth, the roots of the weeds would intertwine with the roots of the wheat, and you could really not pull one without pulling the other. So as the parable goes, it's not the slave's responsibility then to separate the wheat and the weeds. That job, we are told, is left to the reapers. In reality, in our life, it is not our job to separate the weeds from the wheat. That job, we are told, is left to the angels. It's our job then to water and nourish both weeds and wheat so that both are fed and both grow. It's not our job then to judge between the two. First is that both here and in the kingdom of heaven, we are being asked to live with people who are different from us. And this really is easier said than done. It's difficult living with weeds when we are such beautiful flowers. And it's difficult living with touchy and scratchy weeds when we are really gentle to the touch. And it's difficult living with people who seem to have no social redeeming value whatsoever, as opposed to us who are morally upstanding citizens. It's difficult living with people who have the wrong ideas about church, about liturgy and theology, when we ourselves have the right and the correct orthodox ideas that have been handed down from generation to generation. But this is precisely what God is asking us to do. He is asking us to live with those that we consider to be weeds. He is asking us to share our resources with those who are different from us. He is asking us to be patient with those touchy people who annoy us to no end. The reality is that we don't always really even get along with our own species, our own flowers in the garden. And God knows this. God knows that we are all different. God knows that there will be friction and there will be competition for resources. And God asks us to live with weeds. Besides this issue of learning to tolerate the other, we need to understand that it is not our job to pull the weeds. In this parable, the farmer tells the slaves that the reapers will gather and separate the wheat from the weeds at the harvest. If he lets the slaves remove the weeds, all they will do is go out and pull all the good along with all the bad. And then the whole crop can be ruined. Removing people who differ from us is not our job, because we might then just destroy the kingdom. The job of separating the two will be done by the reapers, the angels, at the appropriate time. And yet, we do try. We try very hard. We can be so firmly convinced of our own righteousness and rightness that we see anyone who thinks differently, who acts differently, who interprets differently, we see them as a weed that must be pulled up and tossed aside. And while we think we're doing the Lord's work, the reality is that we're destroying the church. This is what happened, or this is what has happened in history and is happening even now today. Take a look at the mainline churches, starting most recently with the Methodist Church. Looking in the Ferris Tribune, and yes, I still take the Ferris Tribune, there is a Saturday section in that newspaper that is entitled Worship With Us. And on that page there is a global Methodist church, which for years and years and years was the Broadway United Methodist Church, along with the other United Methodist churches that are in town. Calvary Presbyterian Church is now ECO, and the Brethren Presbyterian Church is now USA, and Center Presbyterian is just Presbyterian. Then there are our friends, the Lutherans, ELCA Lutherans, or LCMC Lutherans, or LCMS, and that's just in Cass County. And of course, if you Google the divisions in the Episcopal Church, you will find our own list of acronyms. So it's happening today in the worldwide church over issues such as full equality for everyone, environmental protections and global warming, biblical interpretations, the place of women today, health care, patriotism, and a growing intolerance from anyone who is dubbed the other. The desire to pull up those we see as weeds in order to keep us pure and undefiled is very strong. But that desire to pull up those that we label as weeds will ultimately result in pulling up the good as well as leaving behind a barren patch of ground where nothing will grow. The kingdom of heaven then is apparently like this big garden with sowers and seeds and laborers and reapers. The kingdom of heaven has both wheat and weeds. And in today's parable, we are asked to live with the weeds, to live with those who are different from us, to live with those whom we have determined to be detrimental to the garden until the end of the age. And that is a long, long time from now. So here's something to consider. Just exactly what is the definition of a weed? A weed is nothing more than an unwanted plant. Now, Deb and I have had numerous experiences with weeds and grasses. We had a plant that came up at our front door, and we had no idea what it was. We contemplated pulling it out, but we thought, no, we'll leave it. And we decided to leave it alone and water it along with all the other plants. And lo and behold, it grew into this delicate purple flower with many blooms, and we still don't know what the heck it is. And grass, of course, grows easily in the cracks of my driveway. So why can't I get it to grow within my lawn? So a weed then is in the eye of the beholder. Instead of spending our energy looking for weeds and then tearing up the garden trying to get rid of them, we should be spending our energy putting a stop to those things that are actively destroying the garden. We should be ever vigilant and on guard for those who claim to know the difference between weeds and wheat, and have not only assigned themselves the role of reaper, but have promised a garden of only the plants that they approve of. So in the beginning, God created plants of every kind and saw that it was good. Let's let God determine when to pull weeds from wheat, and let's spend our time ensuring that all the plants in the garden